Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we're going to be breaking down the college football DFS slate for Saturday, December 28th. That is right. We are right in the thick of bowl season right now. And it's really kind of like an odd time in the college football calendar because it's kind of anticlimactic because we had the first round of the college football playoff last week. We've got the second round of the college football playoff next week. And in between, we've kind of got some what people would say meaningless bowl games. But I would argue that no college football is meaningless. And so this is a great opportunity to not only watch some college football, but to play some DFS on DraftKings and FanDuel. And we've got a big time 7-game slate. It actually feels somewhat normal that we've got all these options on a 7-game slate. It's not just trying to pick between, 3 or 4 different running backs on a 2 or 3 game slate. And honestly, it just feels more normal. And so I'm really looking forward to this Saturday slate. We're going to break down all 7 games, tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who you need to be targeting for your DFS lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel for your DFS lineups. Before we get started, I do want to mention, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of our college football DFS content for the rest of the season. We're going to be breaking down the college football playoff slate next week and all the way up until the national championship game. So if you're subscribed, you will know when those new episodes drop. And you can also be with us for all of our college basketball DFS content as well. If you like playing college football DFS, you will enjoy college basketball DFS as well. It is a very similar game in terms of the fact that it is not owned by like big money optimizer bros. You can go in, do your research, play the best plays, and still be profitable. So make sure you stick around for the college basketball content as well. But anyway, that's going to do it for the introduction. We got 7 games to break down. Let's go ahead and dive in with game number 1, Boston College taking on Nebraska. All right, so game number 1 is the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl between Boston College and Nebraska. It's kind of fitting that this game is taking place on a baseball field because this is like the most likely game on the slate to have a baseball score. Nebraska is 4-point favorites in this game with a game total of 45.5, meaning the implied total is about 25-21 in favor of the Cornhuskers. With bowl season, you always have a ton of transfer portaling, opting out, guys declaring for the draft, whatnot. Both of these teams are actually fairly intact. Boston College, they did have their quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, already enter the transfer portal, so it is going to be Grayson James starting. He's actually started the last 3 games for them. 4 games total on the season. He's been in between 16 and 22 DraftKings points every single time. I think that's probably what he's pretty good for here. Nebraska is not like an overwhelmingly good or bad defensive matchup. He doesn't give you a whole lot of rushing upside. And I just kind of struggle to see him being the guy that's going to break the slate. But if you just want a guy to plug in, like get 3x value, get 20 DraftKings points, I think he's a decent look for that. But he's far from my favorite play in this slate. I'm a GPP player when it comes to college football DFS, so he's not the type of guy that I'm going to be targeting. At the running back position, it is a full-blown committee for Boston College. Kai Robichaux is the leader of that committee, though. He's been over 20 carries in the last 4 games, scored over 14 DraftKings points in the last 4 games. But he is splitting carries. Jordan McDonald had 9 carries. He's averaging about 12 carries in each of the last 4 games. And then Trayshawn Ward, the Florida State transfer, didn't play last week. I don't know what's up with that because he had been a pretty substantial part of this running back room. And it wasn't like he had like an injury or anything. I think he was just out of the game plan. So, you do have 3 guys there to consider. Robichaux is the only one that I would consider rostering, if I'm being honest. But Nebraska's a decent run defense, and I do think that this is a situation with a low game total where I just think there's better value plays out there than Kai Robichaux. So he's not one of my favorite plays on the slate, but I do think he's playable. Nebraska only gives up 102 rushing yards per game. So you would be really asking for Robichaux to have an above average performance or fall in the end zone multiple times, and I just don't think that it's super likely either way, but I do think he's rosterable. The wide receiver position for Boston College, they really only throw to one guy. That's Lewis Bond. I think if you're playing the quarterback, Grayson James, you got to stack him with Bond. I think you can play Bond as a one-off play. Reed Harris is kind of like the wide receiver 2. He's really came on lately. In the starts that Grayson James has made, Reed Harris has actually been over 11 DraftKings points in each of the last 3. Maybe he's worth a look for that. He's broken off some big plays in that stretch, at least a 30-yard reception in each of the last 3 games. So maybe he might be worth a dart throw in a GPP. And then you've got the tight end, Kamari Morales. He's a North Carolina transfer. He's pretty solid. He's only $3,700. I think he's far from the worst value play on this slate. On the Nebraska side, they are starting true freshman Dylan Raiola at quarterback, and I'm not going to be suckered into this trap again. We've played him before. We've hyped him up before, but he has not scored above 18.2 DraftKings points all season long. That's just not going to cut it. Now, could he like go off in the bowl game randomly? Yeah, we've seen crazier things happen, right? Like we've seen plenty of crazy stuff happen this bowl season, but It's just not a likely outcome to me. He's a pass for me. At the running back position, though, here's what I do like. Nebraska had been one of the worst running back committees in the nation, but that committee's getting a lot smaller. So Dante Dowda, who had been their best back, is transferring to Kentucky. Now, he's not marked out on DraftKings, but one would assume that if he's already enrolled at another school, he's not going to be playing in this game. And so if he's not playing in this game, Emmett Johnson seems to be like the last guy standing. And Johnson's seen double-digit carries in each of the last 3 games. He scored over 15 DraftKings points in each of the last 3 games. I think this is a pretty good spot for Johnson because the knock on the Nebraska run game had always been how many guys are splitting carries. And if he's going to be the main one getting the carry, then I think that just puts him in a pretty good spot at only $5,400. The wide receiver position, Isaiah Nair is declaring for the draft. He's been their number 1 wide receiver all year long. I do like Ja'Cory Barney Jr. a little bit. He's kind of like this gadget play guy that they'll get to on jet sweeps and screens, so you know he's going to get touches. He hasn't ever really had like any big explosion games, hasn't been above 19 all season long, but $5,100, no Isaiah Nair, you got to feel like he's going to get the ball a little bit. I feel the same way about Jamal Banks, who is still an every down player for this team, but the lack of success for the passing offense has caused him to just not have a super great season like we were hoping he would. But $3,300 for a guy who's an every down player and is probably going to be first or second on his team in targets, that's not a bad look for me. I think he's in the pool as a value play. Game number 2 is between Louisiana and TCU. It is the Isleta, New Mexico Bowl. This game has the highest total on the slate, tied for the highest total on the slate, excuse me. This is going to be one you're definitely going to want to target. TCU is an 11.5-point favorites with a game total of 58.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 35-24 in favor of TCU. That makes TCU the highest implied scoring team on the entire slate. So on the Louisiana side, they were a complete dud in the Sun Belt Championship game because they were already down to their backup quarterback, Chandler Fields, and he left that game in the first quarter with an injury, and they played Daniel Beal, and he was dreadful. Like, I try not to rip college guys on these shows. Like, I genuinely feel like it's in bad form to rip the play of college players. So, like, I'm only going to say something that's objectively true. He was not good in that game. 9 for 24, 2.9 DraftKings points. But what's happening in this game is they're supposed to get their normal starter, Ben Woolridge, back. If they get Woolridge back, they're an entirely different team. Woolridge is a good quarterback. He's a little bit of a dual threat. $7,700 in one of the best game environments of the slate. Woolridge absolutely has to be in your player pool if he's active, in my opinion. And I think it makes for a super appealing game stack option if you want to play quarterbacks on both sides of this game. More on that in a second. At the running back position, Bill Davis is Louisiana's running back, and he was a victim of just the offense being completely shut down after they lost their second quarterback. Negative 0.2 fantasy points against Marshall, -2 rushing yards. I feel like he's due to be back here in this one with the fact that, Louisiana is kind of getting their offense back. $5,000 for him is not a bad price to play. Zillan Perry had a little bit more success in that game, but he still appears to me to be the second back behind Davis. The fact that he did have more success against Marshall, though, he's only $3,500. If you're playing GPPs, I think he could be worth a little bit of a GPP look. Again, when you're playing GPPs, you're looking for guys who can hit home runs, right? Guys who can just have these random explosive games. And Zillan Perry's already shown us one of those with the game that he had in week 14. Now, TCU is a pretty good run defense to target. They give up 174 rushing yards per game, which ranks 94th in the country. So Davis and Perry, not bad options in my opinion, on the contingency that Woolridge is active, because I don't have any faith in this offense if Beal is going to be a quarterback. Speaking of which, the same goes for their wide receiver position, but I'm only targeting one wide receiver for Louisiana. They really don't. Their wide receiver 2 entered the portal, which opens up the door for Lance Legendre to be the clear wide receiver 1. As bad as the offense was against Marshall, he still had 4 for 81 in that game. Streak of 4 straight games over 12 DraftKings points going. He's $4,900. He's going up against the TCU defense that gives up 204 passing yards per game. I think this is a pretty good spot for Legendre. He's going to see a ton of targets in this Louisiana offense. Next up, let's talk TCU. So Josh Hoover is TCU's quarterback. We've talked about him all season long. If you're going to play a pocket passer in DFS, then they need to be on a team that throws the ball a ton. They need to be very clear stacking options at wide receiver, and they need to be in a great game environment. And Josh Hoover checks all 3 boxes. He passes the ball a ton. TCU ranks 12th in the nation in pass rate. He's been over 26 pass attempts in pretty much every game they played. He's only $7,900, which to me is pretty good. Like, again, you're playing a pocket passer, so he's got to have upside, to break his salary without rushing, and he can do that. He's shown the ability to do that. He's been over 30 DraftKings points 4 times this season. And then, stacking partners, we're going to get to that in a second. The game environment, this is the highest scoring game of the slate. They're the highest scoring team of the slate implied totals. So Josh Hoover's in a great spot. He's one of my favorite quarterback plays of the slate. The running back position, so TCU's weird. They had been playing wide receiver Savion Williams at running back because Cam Cook and Trent Battle just hadn't really been cutting it. Well, now Savion Williams is out for this game. No one really knows why. Cam Cook is in the transfer portal. Battle had just been super ineffective coming down the stretch of the season. And Jeremy Payne had been a guy that had kind of been spelling Battle and getting carries as well. So with Williams and Cook out, one of them between Battle and Payne is going to have to see some carries, and they're only $3,600 and $3,000. I anticipate Josh Hoover and the receivers for this team to be quite popular, so it might be a little bit of a leverage play if you want to try out Battle or Payne as a cheap option at the running back position. At the wide receiver spot, as we just mentioned, Savion Williams is out. Jack Beck, their other wide receiver, is out. So Eric McAllister, who was formerly the wide receiver 1 at Boise State, is probably going to be thrust into this role as the number 1 wide receiver. And quite frankly, he's not priced for that. $4,200 for the wide receiver 1 in the TCU offense is just not a reasonable price. He should be like $6,000 if he's going to have that role. So I think this is a smash spot for Eric McAllister. He's one of my favorite wide receiver plays at the slate. I also think JP Richardson's in a pretty good spot. He is more of a slot guy. He is not like a deep ball guy like Eric McAllister can be, but he's seen some explosive games so far this season. 4 games over 17 DraftKings points. He's only $3,900. If you're not going to play McAllister, you can play Richardson. And I think the Hoover double stacks are in play with McAllister and Richardson because you know that this team's going to be passing the ball a ton. They've also got the tight end Drake Dabney, who's only $3,300. And then if you're looking for like a super cheap wide receiver to target, I got to remember which one it is. But there is one guy that we expect to play. Blake Noel is the guy that we expect to play more. He came in with when Jack Beck left the Cincinnati game, had 3 catches for 75 yards. So he's a guy at $3,000 that you can maybe look at stepping into a starting role as well. These TCU receivers, they're going to get a ton of volume. They're going to be cheap. They're going to be popular, but I do think they're guys that you're going to want to be playing. Game number 3 is Iowa State taking on Miami in the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This is like, it's weird that with the college football playoff being what it is now, that the Pop-Tarts Bowl is like one of the prestige bowl games when last year it was kind of like just a meme game, right? But we've got Iowa State, Miami. These are 2 teams that just missed out on the college football playoff, and they're both good. Like, this is going to be a good game. Miami's 3.5-point favorites with a game total of 56.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 30-27 in favor of Miami. And look, y'all, we want to get some pieces from this Iowa State team because Iowa State is a super condensed offense and Miami is a pretty bad defense, if I must say so myself. So anytime you have a condensed offense going up against a bad defense with a solid point total, you want to get pieces of that. Miami, their run defense is quite stout. They rank 19th nationally in rushing yards allowed per game, 59th nationally in passing yards allowed per game, but that's against some of the weaker offenses in the ACC, if I must say so. So I don't feel like those metrics are entirely accurate. My perception is that this Miami team gets caught up in a lot of shootouts. So if you want to play this game for a shootout, you absolutely can. Rocco Becht, we've said all season long about how he's underpriced. Well, now he's up at $8,000. Now he's like appropriately priced. Makes him a little harder to play, but he does have a little bit of rushing upside. He scored 3 rushing touchdowns in the last 4 games. He does have 300 passing yard upside. He's hit that mark once this season, almost twice. And I just think he's a solid play at $8,000 in this matchup, in this game environment. He's going to make my player pool. I think the price tag kind of boxes him out from being like a core play or a favorite play, but I do think he's going to make my player pool. At the running back position, so we've complained all season long about how it's a 3-headed monster for Iowa State with Carson Hansen, Abu Sama, and Jalen Jackson. Well, Jalen Jackson's out for this game. He's been arrested. No comment on that other than that. Hansen and Sama means that they're going to have a little bit more share of the carries, and I think it's a great spot for him because, I mean, they've been effective this season. Hansen, in their last game, did have 15.3 DraftKings points against Arizona State. He's been the better of the 2 backs between him and Sama this season, but Sama is a guy that we saw last year break off some explosive runs, end the season really strong. So I do think that both these guys are going to be in play for me, especially considering, like I said, I anticipate this game is going to be a shootout. At the wide receiver position, Iowa State only throws to 2 guys, Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. If you ask me to pick between the 2 of them, I think Higgins is in a slightly better spot. He tends to see a more higher average depth of target than Noel, who's more of like a short intermediate guy. And they tend to end up with the same amount of targets. So when you're looking at the same amount of targets with guy that's getting more lucrative targets. That tends to, point the needle towards Higgins, but I think they're both in play. I think double stacks are in play. Higgins is probably going to be one of my top wide receiver exposures on the slate. On the other side of this game for Miami, they've got Cam Ward at quarterback. We've gone over all season long how great of a play Cam Ward's been in DraftKings. I think personally, though, that this is not a good spot for him. Iowa State, they play this 3-high safety defense, which really looks to limit big plays. And it shows in their stats. They only give up 165 passing yards a game, and that's in the Big 12 against a lot of really pass-heavy offenses. They're awful against the run because when they're playing 3-high safeties, they're taking a number out of the box to prevent you from getting big plays, right? So they rank 100th in the nation in rushing yards allowed at 180. So I think that this is a spot to target the Miami run game. Now, granted, if you faded Cam Ward this season, like it only paid off for you one game against FSU. If you played him every week this season, it's only hurt you one time this season against FSU. So even though on paper it's not a great matchup, he's still going to make my player pool. Like I'm probably going to do a 20 max. He's probably going to make 2 of them just because I do have a little bit of FOMO of missing out if there is a ceiling Cam Ward game. But at the running back position, they do have a 2-headed monster between Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher Jr. Given the choice between the 2 of them, I'm going to go with Fletcher because they're seeing like near 50-50 split, and Fletcher is $1,700 cheaper on DraftKings. So why not go with the guy that's a little bit cheaper when the volume is pretty similar? And like I said, I do think this is a great matchup for the Miami run game. At the wide receiver spot, Miami does play a lot of wide receivers, but Isaiah Horton is going to be out for this one, which should lead to boosted snaps for Jacoby George and Sam Brown Jr. Sam Brown Jr. at $3,100 to me is in a great spot. Like he's going to be an every down player at $3,100 on an offense that's going to pass the ball a lot in a great game environment. I think he's a great play. I do think that Restrepo and George are very solid pay up options. Restrepo, it's like his last game for Miami. I don't know if he has any Miami school records left to break, but he has a ton of upside and he's a supernatural stacking partner with Cam Ward. Even though that stack does get a little bit expensive, there's plenty of value in the other spots on this slate that you can backfill and able to pay off that stack. All right, that's going to do it for the first 3 games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather and then we're going to go to the last 4. All right, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm also more than happy to answer any questions that you may have if you reach out to me on Twitter as well, because I'm recording this 2 days before the game starts. So actually, no, it's 1 day before the game starts. It is Friday already. Holy crap, this week has flown by. So if you do want my opinions on anything that we don't talk about here on the show, just reach out to me on Twitter. I'm more than happy to answer. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. Link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. The Fantasy Corner Discord is a community of a bunch of people who play DFS who are also really good, really smart people. And we're just in there talking plays, talking lineups, talking strategy all day long for every sport. College football, the chat is always jumping. College basketball, it's always jumping. And then NFL and NBA as well. So if you play any of those sports for DFS and you're just looking for people to talk DFS with, looking for a community to be a part of, or just looking to, just have fun watching the games and sweating it out together, it's a blast to be a part of. I cannot recommend it enough. And then also, if you're wondering who actually makes my lineups and how I piece it all together from all the information that we talk about here on these shows, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. You will get my core plays for every single college football DFS slate, as well as why they're my core plays. So you can just know who's in my lineups and why they're in my lineups. I can't just sit here and promise that you can just plug in those guys and instantly win thousands of dollars. It's not that easy. Anybody who promises that to you is lying. But what I can promise is that you can get well-researched, well-thought-out takes from somebody who understands the X's and O's of college football and understands the game theory of DFS as well. All right, so let's go ahead and continue with game number 4, which is one of the uglier games on the slate. This is the Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl, which sounds like something you would see in a meme, but it's a real thing. The Snoop Dogg Arizona Bowl. I hope he's there. Is this the one that's broadcast on the CW? I know last year was the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl was on the CW, and they had like Big Cat calling the game, but I don't know if they're doing that this year. Anyway, it's the Arizona Bowl. It's Miami, Ohio taking on Colorado State. Miami, Ohio is 2.5-point favorites with a game total of 40.5 points. And I stand corrected that I said that the Boston College Nebraska game was the lowest total of the slate. This one's lower by 5 points because this one is quite ugly. On the Miami, Ohio side, this was a really good offense in the MAC, but they are just not really intact for this game, and they've really struggled against good defenses. They do like to throw the ball, though. Brett Gabbert's been pretty solid all season long. He's only $5,800, and this is a guy who has 5 total games over 20 DraftKings points. I think he's worth a look as a value play. I know the game environment's ugly, but I'd expect this team to throw. And, we've seen some bowl games that with low totals just randomly go crazy. So, this one could be that. And if it is, Brett Gabbert will be one of the best value plays this slate. He's going to make my player pool, but he's not going to be a super big part of it. At the running back position, Keon Mazee is the running back one for this team. He has been all season long. It's been a little bit up and down. You're running back in the MAC. You're playing on Tuesday and Wednesday nights. There's just been a lot of random crazy big games, random crazy small games in the MAC this year. I don't know, man. Like he might make my player pool. Like the Colorado State defense is not good. That's what has me having hope. I think Colorado State might be one of the worst bowl eligible teams. They're ranked 77th in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game, 97th in the nation in passing yards allowed per game. They've kind of gotten whomped by every good team they've played. So I do expect Miami to win this game. And if they do win this game, then probably stands to reason that either Gabbert or Mazee is going to hit value. Mazee's backup is Kevin Davis, $3,100. He's probably going to see some carries, but not a whole lot. The wide receiver position, this is where I actually really want to target this Miami team. So basically, Miami's wide receiver position has been a three-headed monster all season long. Tracy, Virgil, and McDonald. What you saw coming into the season was Cade McDonald was their wide receiver one. He got hurt, and it really allowed Tracy and Virgil to develop. And when McDonald came back, you just saw super condensed target shares. Like all three of these guys were seeing like around a 25 to 30% target share. And really, they were the only guys getting fed the ball, right? Well, if you're watching on YouTube, you see where I'm about to go with this. Both Javon Tracy and Reggie Virgil are in the transfer portal. So of the big three that they've been targeting like at like 80%, 90% clip, the only one that's left is Cade McDonald. He was their wide receiver one coming into the season. So this could mean a huge volume game for Cade McDonald at only $5,000. I think he's one of the best wide receiver value plays on the slate. If you were to ask me, okay, well, Mike, they only threw to three guys. That's one. Who are the other guys going to be? I'll be honest, I don't know. Like this is a super hard team to figure out. I think it's kind of a fool's errand to try to figure it out. If you want to look up their depth chart and see who's starting before game day, I think that would be a move and maybe a potential play. But I'm going to really just stick with Cade McDonald. I think he is going to be the supreme alpha in this offense with Tracy and Virgil both out. On the Colorado State side, they've got quarterback Braden Fowler-Nicolosi at quarterback. And this started out like last year, they were like a big air raid team. He was throwing the ball all over the yard. And then like as this season went on, like they were becoming like more of this run dominant team, right? But in the last two games against Fresno and Utah State, 45 pass attempts or more in both those games for Braden Fowler-Nicolosi. 23 DraftKings points against Fresno, 41 against Utah State. Maybe there's a little bit of something here. Maybe this game ends up going crazy. The game total is only 40.5. It's the lowest on the slate, but I can just see this game going crazy. Like, I just think that there's a chance. So at $6,000, I would rather play Gabbert on the other side. But like if Colorado State's going to continue to be this air raid team, maybe Fowler-Nicolosi could absolutely hit value at $6,000. At the running back position, so Colorado State really screwed us in week 14. Justin Marshall, it was looking like was going to be the starter against Utah State. He only saw 4 carries for 8 yards because the normal starter, Avery Morrow, came back from injury when he wasn't supposed to. And so Morrow in that game saw 21 carries. Morrow is the guy that you want to be targeting. Miami's a really good run defense, though, not going to be targeting this running back. Now, the wide receiver position is where this gets interesting for Colorado State. So basically, coming into the season, they had Torrey Horton, who was one of the best wide receivers in the country. And he had been a guy that was like a super target hog, like one of the top receiver options on DraftKings every time he was on the slate. He got hurt and no one really stepped up. It had kind of been Caleb Goody, had kind of been the guy who had been the most productive wide receiver in Torrey Horton's absence. But now he's in the portal. And so somebody's got to step up and do something in this Colorado State offense. If they're going to throw the ball 40 times, somebody's got to catch them. And so there's two guys that kind of developed a little bit at the end of the season. Armani Winfield is one of them, had 6 for 32 against Utah State, which isn't a big stat line, but it shows that they're very clearly trying to get him involved and get him the football. And he's only $3,700. And then the other one is Dane Olson at $3,500, had 5 for 140 and a touchdown in that Utah State game. So maybe, if they're going to be throwing the ball a lot, it seems like those two guys, Winfield and Olson, will be the two guys that they would throw to. Also, don't discount Vince Brown. This Colorado State tight end position has been super lucrative. When you look back at the last 5 years from Trey McBride to Dallin Holker, Vince Brown's now the starting tight end. Last game, he did have 22 DraftKings points against Utah State. He might be worth a look also. So I do think that if you're targeting anybody from the Colorado State passing game, for me, it is Winfield, Olson, Brown. Those are the 3 names I'm looking at. Game number 5, we've got ECU taking on NC State, which is ironic because these two teams are in-state rivals in North Carolina, but yet they're going to Annapolis to play a bowl game. It's the Go Bowling Military Bowl, which again sounds like a meme, but it's not. It's a real thing. NC State is 6-point favorites with a game total of 58.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 32 to 26 in favor of NC State. This is tied for the highest scoring game total on the slate with Louisiana and TCU. On the ECU side, they've got Caden Hauser, and he kind of took over as the starter midseason after the Charlotte game, my alma mater, the Charlotte 49ers, walloped ECU 55-24. And then after that, ECU kind of went on this roll. They fired their head coach. They started Caden Hauser, and it's been okay. Like, he's had 3 games over 30 DraftKings points, but the last 3 have all been under 20. But they played some of the better defenses in the American Athletic in that stretch. $7,500 is a high price to pay. I don't think he's ready to play a defense that's caliber of NC State. He's probably a pass for me. I think there's better points per dollar quarterback plays elsewhere. At the running back position, I do love Rajay Harris because this is a workhorse running back in the truest form. Ever since the interim head coach took over, he'd been like really making it a point to give Rajay Harris a lot of carries, over 18 in each of the last 3 games, over 30 DraftKings points in 2 of those 3 games. A lot of upside, a lot of carries, $6,500, very reasonable price tag to pay. I like him a lot. At the wide receiver position, it had been a 3-headed monster at ECU. It had been Winston Wright Jr., Anthony Smith, and Chase Sowell that had been their top 3 wide receivers. And those guys had kind of rotated in and out because some of them had been injured, missed games. And those were kind of the 3 guys that, when 2 of them were healthy or 3 of them were healthy, it was very concentrated around those guys. So with that being said, Chase Sowell, who'd probably been the most productive of all 3 of them, is in the transfer portal. So Winston Wright Jr. and Anthony Smith should both have increased roles in this game, but they're priced up for it. They're at $5,800 and $5,300. The guy I like is Yannick Smith. And the reason why, I think he's going to step into the Chase Sowell role. Reason why I think that, week 13 against North Texas, Chase Sowell missed with an injury. Yannick Smith came in, had 8 targets, 7 catches for 112 yards and a touchdown, 27.2 DraftKings points. Parlayed that into like a partial role against Navy, where he caught 3 for 66 and a touchdown, 15.6 DraftKings points. If he's going to be in the Chase Sowell role, $3,100 is not where he should be priced at. He should be like $6,100. So I think this is a really good spot to buy low on Yannick Smith. I think he's probably the premier value play of the slate at the wide receiver position, as long as he ends up starting like we think he's going to start. There's all this conjecture, all this speculation with some of these bowl games and these opt-outs, and, who's going to be like the beneficiary, who's going to be the guy that steps up in that spot. This one seems pretty easy to connect the dots because the guy that has left, Chase Sowell, has already missed a game. And in the game he missed, Yannick Smith was the guy that started. So it seems like it's easy dots to connect. As long as the ECU coaching staff doesn't throw us for a loop, he seems to be one of the best value plays on the slate, the wide receiver position. But again, crazier things have happened than just, a guy like that not playing or not being productive. But on paper, he looks like one of the best value plays on the slate at the wide receiver position. All right, let's talk about NC State now. So the Wolfpack come in at 6-6, a little bit of a disappointment of a season, but they've got their quarterback of the future in CJ Bailey, and he has been productive. In 5 of the last 6 games, he's been over 22 DraftKings points. We will take that at a salary of $6,300, and NC State's got an implied team total of 32 points. He's got a little bit of rushing upside as well. I think this is a great spot for CJ Bailey at $6,300. He is one of my favorite quarterback plays on the entire slate. At the running back position, it has been a committee for NC State, but the good news is they're starting to have a leader of the committee. It is Hollywood Smothers. He had 13 carries for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns against North Carolina. Also had 3 catches for 34 yards in that game. Season high 26.7 DraftKings points. He also had 2 of his other previous 5 games over 20 DraftKings points. I think this is the guy you want in this backfield. And ECU is such a bad run defense. They have just been absolutely battered by the better running teams in the AAC, like Charlotte, like Navy, like Tulane. And they give up 179.2 rushing yards per game, which ranks 99th in the country. I think this is a really good spot for Hollywood Smothers. If you are a believer in Jordan Waters, I don't mind him as a play either. But again, to me, it seems like Smothers has taken over the RB1 role. So I'm going to play Smothers over Waters. But if you're playing a GPP, you want to get some leverage, you want to get a guy at low ownership, Jordan Waters probably not a bad option. At the wide receiver position, NC State's best receiver, Kevin Concepcion, is in the transfer portal. Now, here is the bad news. We don't know what's going to happen with his role or who we can target off of that, right? Because basically, Concepcion had been playing virtually every snap in the offense, and he'd been getting the ball quite a ton. And around him, there was just this rotating cast of characters with guys that are all pretty talented, all pretty good, but no one really separating from the pack. You have Wesley Grimes, the Wake Forest transfer, Noah Rogers, the Ohio State transfer, Dakari Collins. I don't think he transferred from anywhere, but all 3 of those guys played in rotational roles, and they're all probably going to start here in this one. It's quite likely that one of them is going to hit value. I would bet on Rogers, because I think he's just the most talented of the 3. Grimes has been the best recently, but I just don't know for certain. That's why he's priced up the highest. one of those three is probably going to go off. Or also, they have this talented freshman that I actually coached against when he was in high school when he was at Grimsley. Terrell Anderson, super talented. He can kind of take over the KC Concepcion role. They've looked to get him involved all season long. Hasn't really exploded for a huge game, but it wouldn't shock me if he just comes in and he's all of a sudden the next KC Concepcion. The kid can really play, and he's only $3,300. Then you also have the tight end, Justin Jolly. It's also quite possible that Bailey's just going to look for Jolly all the time because he's a matchup nightmare. ECU doesn't have anybody on their defense who's going to match up with him. $3,300 is a very reasonable price tag to pay for him. So how I'm going to be targeting this game is I'm going to have a lot of CJ Bailey lineups, and I'm going to be playing CJ Bailey with at least one wide receiver for NC State in every single one of them, and I'm going to be rotating different guys: Grimes, Rogers, Collins, Jolly, and Anderson. That's how I'm going to be approaching it, and that's just what I'm doing. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but I think that one of them is going to go off, and I want to be on the one that does. Next up, game number 6, we have BYU taking on Colorado, the rare conference matchup for a bowl game at the Valero Alamo Bowl. Colorado is 4-point favorites with a game total of 54.5 points, meaning the implied total is about 29-25 in favor of Colorado. It's crazy how close we were to actually seeing this as the Big 12 championship game. Now it's just the Alamo Bowl. Jake Retzlaff is BYU's quarterback. I got to be honest, I think he's a little overpriced. The only hope of playing him to me would be playing him in like a game stack. Because I feel like that would be how he would hit his ceiling. He's not going to hit his ceiling with like low passing volume or anything like that. So Colorado's a team that's pretty tough to pass against. So I think a game stack option, that's the only way I'm playing Retzlaff. The running back position, I do like LJ Martin a lot. So LJ Martin last game only saw 9.6 DraftKings points scored, but he touched the ball 22 times. I am willing to chase volume. And so with that volume of 22 carries against Houston, if he gets 22 carries against Colorado, he's probably going to put up more than 9.6 DraftKings points. Colorado's been a pretty pedestrian run defense. We saw Devin Neal put up over 50 DraftKings points against him a few weeks ago. So I think LJ Martin, big time play here in this game. At the wide receiver position, Darius Laster is going to miss the first half of this game. That takes him totally out of play, in my opinion. And it makes Chase Roberts probably this team's wide receiver 1, but he hasn't really had any like huge games this season. Like he's at $6,300 and his ceiling this season was 21.9 DraftKings points. I just don't see the ability for him to like break a slate. But again, I think I'm going to play him the same way I'm going to play Retzlaff. If I'm doing a full game stack of this game, he's probably going to be the guy that I would get in there. And he's probably the only other BYU option that I'm considering. On the Colorado side, so Colorado's doing something that I actually think is pretty cool. I actually think it should get more national attention. I think Deion Sanders should be praised for this. All of Colorado's guys that are going to the draft are playing in this game because they are under draft insurance, which is really smart. It's how you get guys that are draft eligible to play in bowl games is you give them insurance that if they get injured, they're going to get however much money. So that way you avoid like the Jake Butt situation from 8 years ago. If you don't know that, look it up. So Shedeur Sanders is playing in this game. He's $9,700. Look, Shedur's great. Like, he's just great. And, you know, we talk about if you're going to play a pocket passer on DraftKings, you want them to have clear stacking partners, check. You want them to pass the ball a ton, check. They're ranked 6th nationally in pass rate. And you want them to have a good game environment, 54.5 point game total, check. Shedeur Sanders absolutely in play as a pay-up option at the quarterback position, in my opinion. Running back position, Isaiah Augustov is questionable for this one. I don't know if he plays or not. I'd have slight interest in him if he does because he has shown to be the best one. But if he doesn't, you're just going to see this committee of Welch, Hayden, and Offerdahl, and I just don't have a lot of interest in it. At the wide receiver position, Travis Hunter is playing in this game. He's been great all season long. He's obviously the Heisman Trophy winner. I've kind of poo-pooed playing him in DraftKings, and it's kind of hurt me a few times because, like, it was very clear over the second half of the season they were trying to get him the Heisman Trophy. They were trying to feed him the football. I don't know if that's going to be the case here in this one. I think $9,500 is a little expensive. I'm going to continue fading him and opt to play the other Colorado receivers like LeJonte Wester, like Will Shepherd, and like Draylon Miller, who are all going to be out there as every down players. If Jimmy Horn Jr. is out, which I think he will be, Draylon Miller is like probably one of the top wide receiver value plays on the slate. I just don't think that Jimmy Horn's going to play. And if he doesn't, then Draylon Miller is great value play. Wester and Shepherd, great value plays at their price, in my opinion. I think they're very reasonably priced for their roles in this offense. All right, last game of the day. We've got Louisiana Tech taking on Army. This is like the most lopsided bowl game that there is because Louisiana Tech shouldn't be in this game. They shouldn't be against Army. They're a 5-7 team that got called up because Marshall opted out because their entire team hit the portal. This is not an even matchup. This game could get ugly. Army is 16.5 point favorites with a game total of 44.5 points, which, by the way, this is the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl. When I was working at Charlotte, when I was working in film, there was a chance my senior year that we were going to get to go to a bowl game. We ended up losing our final 3 games to not go to a bowl game. But like all the guys were talking in the facility, how of all the bowl destinations that we could get going to when we were in Conference USA, the Independence Bowl was at the bottom of the list because we don't want to go to Shreveport, Louisiana. The only good news is for Louisiana Tech is it's not a far drive to Shreveport, Louisiana. So they are going to be, they do have kind of a little bit of a home field advantage, and the destination isn't going to like break their spirits or anything. So yeah, that's about all I have to say about Louisiana Tech. They've got Evan Bullock at quarterback. He's had some good games in Conference USA, but man, Army's defense is really good. Army's defense is going to be the best defense they played all season long. I just don't have any confidence to play it. At the running back position, Amiri Wiggins went off in their last game against Kennesaw State, 35 DraftKings points. It's clear now he's the running back one. Because it'd kind of been a committee all season long, but I just don't really want to target this Army run defense. The wide receiver position, I do think I have a little bit of interest because True Edwards, who had been their wide receiver 1, is in the portal. Jimmy Holiday had been their wide receiver 2, had some pretty productive games, $4,600. This team's going to be trailing. Maybe they do get a few deep plays to Holiday at $4,600. That's not a bad look in my opinion. After that, Marlon Jackson is probably another guy that could probably step forward, but he hasn't played since week 8. Like he was their wide receiver 2 heading into week 8 and hasn't played since. So like, I'm not saying you should target him, but like on paper, he's a guy that should benefit in my opinion. Solo Lewis is also a guy that like they really look to get the ball in his hands. He's involved pretty much every week, but Holiday's the guy that I'm looking at on this Louisiana Tech side. He's probably the only guy on Louisiana Tech that I'm going to be rostering. On the Army side, Bryson Daly, quarterback, the top quarterback play of the slate, in my opinion. If you were asking me to project all quarterbacks, rank how I think they're going to do, he's number 1, and I don't think it's all that close. He's seeing a slight decrease in price because he only scored 8.8 DraftKings points against Navy. That is a defense that sees the triple option every day in practice, knew how to stop him, was prepared, played well. And I'm willing to write that off as just an aberration because before that, he'd had 2 games over 40 DraftKings points. He'd been over 28 in every single game since the FAU game in week 2. Super consistent. It's all because of his legs running as the quarterback of this Army triple option offense. I think this is a great spot for Bryson Daly. 10-2 is a very reasonable price. He has the chance to give you 4x value. He has the chance to break the slate. And oh, by the way, he might have even more upside than usual because their number 1 running back, Kanye Udo, is in the transfer portal. He's already at Arizona State, not going to be playing in this game. So if Udo's carries are going to go to somebody else, some of them might go to Bryson Daly. It's quite likely that the rest of them are going to go to Noah Short and Tyrell Robinson. Maybe those guys are worth targeting now because like Udo had been the main like guy that they were using in the triple option that wasn't named Bryson Daly. So with Udo out, Short and Robinson probably going to make my player pool, but not going to be a big part of it. Not targeting an Army wide receiver. No thanks on that regard. But all right, y'all, that's going to do it here for this episode. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information that you need to know in order to build some winning DFS lineups on DraftKings and FanDuel for this Saturday bowl slate. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I really do appreciate it. I cannot stress that enough. And make sure you're subscribed to the channel on YouTube and subscribe to the audio feed. That way you can be with us for the rest of our college football coverage all the way up through the college football playoff and all of our college basketball content all the way up through the Final Four as well. Also, if you are interested in fantasy golf, we posted a video last night about one and dones for the 2024 season. So if you're interested in some fantasy golf, one and done, check that out as well on the channel. That's going to do it here for this episode, y'all. Best of luck to you guys on the Saturday slate. Hopefully we get kind of like a normalized slate. The last few days have been a little weird in the college football world. Just super unpredictable, super weird games. A lot of portaling, opting out. A lot of guys that said they're playing and don't. A lot of guys that aren't playing and do. And it's been a weird week. So hopefully this week can provide a little bit of normalcy. Hopefully all the research we did and just espoused to you guys will help you out a little bit. But anyway, thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you guys on the Saturday slate, and I will see you guys next time.